much for your attention. The next wee while, I had to explain to some colleagues last week what we meant because I was in Japan, and unfortunately colloquial language doesn't always translate particularly well. So for a short while, I'll take you through some things about council and the fact that we'd actually love you to join, and you'll have the opportunity to ask questions as well. If anything particularly urgent comes up, can I recommend that somebody does come off mute and tells me or asks me a question, because I might not spot it just as we go along. Try to keep an eye on time as well. Please stop me if I'm just being ridiculous in terms of the amount of stuff I'm covering. So let me tell you what the role of council is. It's a body that represents who our members are, not in terms of necessarily full-on constituency stuff. So yes, we do have constituents that make up the council membership. So we do have constituents from the specialist groups, we have constituents from early professionals, as you say, and so on. But my comment about the MPs was more that we don't necessarily, once we've become a council member, then go back and only represent that group or only consult with that group of people, but we do act potentially on their behalf. We have the powers, with powers to elect the president, the deputy president, and typically the deputy president becomes the president the next year, but there is a formal process by which that happens. We elect the vice presidents, so those are the people that sit on different boards that we have. And we also have members of council on the trustee board of the Institute as well. Our role really is about providing advice to trustee board, potentially also to the executive and to the other boards and committees as well. And we do get consulted on the strategic plans and the annual budget that come that are built by the executive with the trustee board. So the challenge with this is it's kind of a lot of words, and if I'm honest, BCS, for me, I thought council. I knew that there was a thing that council existed. I knew a little bit about what it did, but sometimes it's kind of tricky putting it in context. So what I have is a chart next that puts it in context. Now, I don't want you to panic too much by it, but it's just a way of explaining a little bit about our role in the bigger picture. So you could see BCS there in the middle in a shade of green, and BCS is made up of professional members and also some members that are not the professional members. The members are member groups and are split. Start again. The members have access to member groups like the branches and the specialist groups, as you know very well. And the members can also sit on a number of boards. BCS also happens to have an educational arm, so BCS Learning and Development, and some joint ventures and other companies associated with that learning and with professional bodies as well. There are some associates with BCS that you may or may not be aware of. SFI in particular, the Skills Framework for the Information Age, is something I happened to be talking about last week. Went on a piece of business. I happened to work for a company called IBM, and our client was asking something about skills and how they better define their skills. So I mentioned this, even though it was nothing to do with IBM necessarily, although we do use it too. And so BCS is really there it's a membership body where the chartered, I forget what the word is I'm looking for, but we have that ability to designate chartered IT professionals. We are a chartered body, a professional organisation, and with a learning arm. And essentially, we're governed by this trustee board. So the trustee board has advises, delegates things to the executive. It delegates to a number of committees. I'll tell you a little bit about some of those soon. And the trustee board is advised by council. So that's kind of where we sit. We sit and provide advice to trustee board, and which in turn might be advice to the executive, it might be advice to the committees, it might even turn into some advice for learning and development, depending on where our help is needed, where advice and guidance is needed. So BCS is possibly bigger than you realised it was. It was certainly bigger than I realised it was when I signed up and was elected to council. There's an awful lot going on. It's a hugely influential body, although has so much more room to be influential. And that makes me think about my next slide. So let me just move on to that. So we've already talked about council influencing or advising rather trustee board, and I talked about some of the other boards and the other committees. So we have three community boards you'll be familiar with, and John associated with that. We have the Academy of Computing, where we're looking very much at computing within academia, and there are a number of responsibilities and a number of groups that sit within the BCS Academy of Computing as well. And we have the newly created Influence Board. So I mentioned influence, and that's what made me think of this next chart. So the Influence Board is something that was created earlier in the year as a result of the observation that we need to have a greater influence. So we do some great things and we do have influence, but we need to do more. There's so much more need in the industry and in wider society, frankly, that BCS can influence. It could be influence around about technologies, about the adoption of technologies, about concerns around about technologies. It could be influence on a whole number of matters. In case you weren't aware, the BCS actually has 4 themes it's working on. One is professionalism. One is inclusion, diversity, one is net zero, and one is digital divide. I think it's quite interesting if we've got an inclusion one and a digital divide, because there is a huge set of society that is not included, but they are 2 slightly different angles. So that's the reason that there are 4 themes. So it will be the role of the Influence Board to take these themes and other priorities that BCS is working on and make sure we're influencing out into the right places, whether that's government or other elements of industry, to be able to make a positive difference to the world that we're living in and that we're doing business in and working in, and so on. So council's role for these, and sorry, I should also say there's 4 committees as well. Nominations are responsible for the nominations, what it says on the tin. So the nominations committee will do things like nominate our deputy presidents and people for that, and they'll nominate vice presidents who will run these particular boards. They will nominate a number of other key figures, potentially through awards and that kind of thing. So there's the nominations committee. There's also the Risk Audit and Finance Committee that reports into Trustee Board, and that's an interesting one to see the things that are on the mind of RAFCA and what we need to be conscious of, and particularly right now with some interesting challenges around about our financial situation in the UK and so on. There's definitely some challenging conversations go in that particular area. Registration and Standards Committee, well, again, it does what it says on the tin. It is about registration. So thinking about our registered chartered ID professionals, about the standards that we have for fellows and the criteria and that sort of thing that may change and might evolve. And the challenges they have are, how do we make sure that we are relevant, continuing to have relevant skills and relevant chartered IT professionals for this wider digital world than perhaps some of the slightly more narrow definitions of computing there might have been in the past, but at the same time not compromise on standards as well. So they have a really interesting and difficult job as well. And the Remuneration Committee is really about how is remuneration sorted out for our most senior roles in the executive. So these are 7 groups, shall we say, that Trustee Board has influence over, has governance over, and really does lead a way that like a board might do for a business. We have a trustee board for a charity, and there's council on the left hand side working hand in hand with trustee board to advise in potentially all 7 of these areas. So if your mind is a bit blown right now and a bit boggled, don't worry about it. There is a lot to take in, and I apologise for not potentially being the most clear on the original slide with the number of different groups that there are. The point was really to make that BCS probably does more than you think it does, and actually there's so much opportunity to influence and do some stuff for good. So let me move on to what does the year look like in council. And so I'm going to start with May because our AGM happens just before this. And in May this year, I'm not taking you through this year because that's the easiest one. I'm very familiar with it. In May, we had the election of the chair of council. Now, this was a really good, fun one. And the reason for that was because of the way that council terms, or your membership of council, because of the way terms run, the person who had been chair, they had served as much time as our regulations allow as a member of council, whether they were chair or vice chair or whatever, they had, their time was up. So they finished at the AGM, which meant that there was no chair for our May meeting. There was only the vice chair, who was me. And I happened to put myself forward for chair of council. But it's quite difficult to run an election process that involves questions and answers as the vice chair if you are also needing to run that with yourself as a candidate. So we had a fun moment in the meeting where we as a group of members had to nominate somebody else in the meeting to then run a short period of the meeting while I essentially stepped back and let them do that. I was the only candidate. So fortunately, everyone was very kind and decided that, well, you know, she might be all right. We haven't got anyone else. Well, let's just see how it goes. So I was elected as chair. However, I did continue to run the rest of the meeting as a vice chair, and I didn't actually step up as chair until the June meeting. It's very complicated. Anyway, so we elected the chair of council twice, apparently, now that I read my notes. We didn't. We only elected me once. We elected the vice president for registration and standards committee. We elected the representative on nominations committee for learning and development, and we also elected council members to be trustees. So a number of our council sit on trustee board as well. They don't necessarily act on behalf of council. You hope they would, but essentially we look at people that in our council membership and who've put themselves forward and determine whether we think that they can act as trustees. We also gave some advice to community board. So I spoke with Alistair Revel, and he came up with this challenge: how council members can help grow our membership. How members already in BCS can help grow our membership, and how can council further support that. And we broke out into a number of groups and had lots of discussions and came back with lots of notes. And Holly, who's our membership director, very kindly took lots of notes of those, and she went away and had built a report for us and has actually taken on a number of those actions as well. One other thing we had to do, a little bit of slightly less exciting, but nonetheless important work on looking at their council regulations and just reviewing what they were and approving them. I had the opportunity to make a few minor updates, even little things like, for me, wanted to change the language where it always said he or she. These days we can see they, right? That's a more inclusive term. So I've tried to spot all those in our regulations and update them. So we weren't drastically changing the way that council works, but just trying to make sure that we're staying up to date and current. Then there was June, and June was when we elected the vice chair, because now that I had moved from vice chair to chair, we needed somebody to act as vice chair for us. So we did that, and Rachel Steenson became our vice chair, which is great because she keeps me right. We did have to do some annual documentation review. Again, important, less exciting, but really important. And it's things like that that need a little bit more of the prep time. Then the next piece, and it was actually the second thing that we did in the agenda, which was why I put it in the second bullet, even though I've covered it third. And that was giving more advice to the BCS executive. And this is about council's role in fellowship. So the way that people were going to apply for fellowship was going to change, the process was going to change, the criteria had changed, widened. Let's just say it's widened, because I really don't want anyone to think that at any point has it become less important, shall we say, or the standard hasn't reduced. We've made it broader. Because, well, it's a long story. Anyway, what was one of our roles? So we went into breakout groups and discussed how we can help fellowship, how we can grow fellowship, how we can make fellowship more important to organizations, to individuals, to people that we work with, to the industry in general. Let's get more recognition for people who are doing wonderful things in tech and who are leaders in tech. And leaders can mean many different things. So that was one of the things that we went to. And also, I've added it here in pictures. One of the things I was conscious is having joined council during our days of lockdown, where everything was done virtually, I didn't really know the people in council particularly well. I had met everyone face to face in May, but we decided that in June we would all go for a beverage of some sort after the meeting as well, just to get to know one another and understand a bit more about what people are passionate about. And I want to continue to bring that sort of thing into council. I think it's really important that, I think we'll be more effective if we know more about each other and how we all work. And then there's another part of the year as well. So coming up in November, we will elect the president. We'll elect the deputy president. So the president, this should be more straightforward because we have a deputy president right now, but we will receive a number of candidates from the nominations committee that we will interview to and then vote on who should be deputy president. So we have that exciting process to do in November. We've also got a number of other things to look to elect as well. The elections, there are the chair and the vice chair, the president, the deputy president, those sort of things, they're fairly standard every year. Some of the others change a little, just depending on the amount of time that they serve in a particular position. FTAG update. So one of the things that we have been asked to do as BCS by my Mayank, actually, who is our president, we've been asked within council to put together some advice on what the trends in technology which trends should be our priorities for the next year. And that's the sort of thing that we could then take through marketing. It could be themes that we use in specialist group sessions. It could be all sorts of things. So we're working with Rashik, who just now happens to be our CEO, but was and actually still is the leader of FTAG. That's our fellowship Fellows Technical Advisory Group. We are going to work together with Rashik on what the trends should be. So FTAG will focus on more the technologies themselves, and council will look at things like methods and governance and some of the, shall we say, softer themes that might not be a pure technology, but could be how we implement it, for example. So that's what we've got coming up in November. I neglected to put in the drinks, but there will be some socializing as well, where I can make that possible. And then in January, what we get to do is we get together and we have couple of days with trustee board to do some strategy planning. So we work with BCS executive to understand where we've got to so far with previous strategy, how that needs to change, what opportunities there are. Again, our role is largely advisory on what strategy should be. And that's what we'll get to do. Last year, I ended up having to join the strategy day virtually because of COVID challenges. And some people got to be there in person, but some of us joined online. And I loved it. It was so collaborative and really, really positive. The biggest challenge I think that we have as BCS, full stop, is that there's so much to do. And how do we prioritize everything? Because we can't. So what do we prioritize? And that's one of the particular challenges. And there's at least one person who's a member of council who's always really good at going, but what are you going to say no to? Or words to that effect. Anyway, so that's the sort of things that we get on and with doing, and we do more, right? So those are the things that we do in our meetings. But actually, at least one member of council has been involved with standards to make sure that there is input to what the new criteria for fellowship should look like. Some of us have been involved in the recruitment of our new chief executive. I know Rashik through work. I should say that there was no bias. In fact, I took great pleasure in being able to ask him a question. That was great fun. The tables had turned. So there are a number of other things that we do as well. And I know there's council members that do more on behalf of council and it's not captured. And I actually kicked off a conversation just a little bit earlier today, say, how do we capture all this in a way that's means we know what's happening, but isn't too formal and too much of an overhead, an onerous process to follow as well. So there's lots and lots. And there's more that we could do, right? So we're going on tour. Everything happens in London or hybrid, no longer. So next year, plan is to visit probably Northern Ireland and have something there and do more, right? Let's get to meet some of the ministers, people from government when we're there. Let's do stuff with branch. Let's do other things. Maybe there's something we could do with schools. So we could have a big project we'll see what's manageable, but we've certainly got plans to do that. I want to do something more about communicating with membership. I have committed to a blog the way that MyAnc does, and I haven't yet blogged. So I'm already delinquent on that. I'm going to get that fixed. I want council to get to know each other a bit better. I've mentioned that already. I want more social activity. We had a review a few years ago to make sure we were going in the right direction. And I think it would benefit some of our members if they knew a bit more about that. So we're planning on doing that again as well. And we'll record it so any new members get to hear it as well. But we're also thinking about other things, right? So maybe we should buddy up with new council members. Maybe we should have a shadow board. I mean, you can read the words. You don't really need me to read them back at you. But those are some of the things that we could do. And I picked this image on the right because she was looking particularly unimpressed. And I thought that was a good reminder to me. Let's make things a little bit more agile, a little bit more flexible, and look for ways to be better for everybody. So I need to keep an eye on time, not doing too badly. But what do we need, right? So we have new members to council every year. Some people do a second and third term. Some people are only in for one term for different reasons. And we just always need difference. We just need difference. So diversity of education, diversity of social background, diversity of thought. Diversity of thought is essentially what it is. We need a set of people that look different and that think differently. And so there's more work to be done on that one. We need new ideas. Particularly where we have a board, a council where there's some that have been around for a while. It's always great to get some new folks in who why do we do it like this, and can we not change it? And that could be, why does council do it like this, or it could be, why does trustee board do it like this, or why does BCS executive do it like this? Why can't we change it? So definitely new ideas. Enthusiasm. Love a little bit of energy, definitely need a bit of energy. For our meetings sometimes can feel a bit long, particularly if they're online. So we want your enthusiasm and energy. Passion for our 4 themes, right? There are 4 themes right now with BCS. They might change, but I mentioned them earlier. They're 4 they are. I don't mean that you have to love every 4 or each of the 4 equally. There might be one in particular that you're really passionate about. Let's pick that one up and do something a bit more with it in council. If you were to join us, if you go through the process, then we do need people to have time for 3 meetings. They're round about 4 hours, maybe a little bit less, 11 till 3-ish, but there's a break for lunch in the middle, right? A 1.5 day workshop. That's because our strategy, normally we have that joint session and then a little bit more. And then some prep time for those meetings. I did mention, and I didn't make it exciting, but I did mention the regulations and some of the documents that we need to review. And it's worthwhile having a read of those and making sure that they are current and up to date, and they do represent what it is that we need to do. So there is a bit of prep time involved in that kind of thing. And I've put in maybe a little more because I do want to go to places that are not London. I sit in Edinburgh, and I am thinking Northern Ireland for the next one because of that's where Rachel is. But we'd like to do a little bit more. We'd like to do a little bit more, but we recognise that this is a voluntary effort. So John said that I might tell you a little bit more about the process. The process, and I don't know what the dates are, so I would rely thoroughly on emails. And if John says it's the 25th of October, then I'm happy to go with the 25th of October. But essentially, the process is you will fill in a form. It's a really high level form. What are some of your qualifications? What do you want to do? And in fact, the form might even have changed this year. It's what I filled in, and submit a video, what it is that you would bring to council. And we, I had to do the videos for vice chair and for chair, but essentially, it's things that you do really easily. It's not, I don't think it's particularly difficult, but that's to put yourself forward. You will need 2 people from BCS, from the membership, to support you. So you'll probably, and somebody to nominate you and somebody to second it, essentially. And then it goes through to an election process, and people vote. Essentially, they order their preference. So if there's 20 people who put themselves forward, then they order them in 1 to 20. If 2 people put themselves forward, then they're ordered 1 to 2. And the number of slots that are available will be filled by how many people put themselves forward. It's really not a difficult process. For me, the difficulty was always just taking the time to do anything rather than actually the doing of the process itself. So I'd recommend it. I really enjoy council. It's I wasn't totally sure what to expect. But if I'm honest, part of the reason I joined was because somebody had said, "Oh, our council still doesn't represent our members particularly well." I'm not going to comment on whether or not that was true. I'm not totally sure that was true, but I think I know what they were getting at. So I wanted to help make a difference. That's kind of I'm one of those people that just wants to help make a difference, and it's amazing, actually, and quite an honor to be part of an organization, and as in council, part of an organization that really can take a little step back from the day-to-day that the executive has to do, take a little bit of step back from the governance that trustee board has to do, and think about the bigger picture and what it is that we should be doing. They won't always take on everything that we say they should do, partly because we probably tell them there's too much to do, but it is an honor. And I'm going to stop now because there needs to be time for questions, and I'm taking far too long. So let me switch that off now, and then you can just see folks.
Thank you, Sharon. I love that you used a photo of my colleague Suki looking unimpressed. I can't wait to report back to that. I probably see that thinking face, deep thinker. That's her thinking face, but that's fantastic. So really appreciated that. Really good to kind of get the kind of wide organizational context where council fits in, and also just that you don't need to know BCS inside out to get involved in stuff. Get involved, you'll learn things quite quickly. People like Sharon happy to help you navigate around the place and give you the support, and so you don't need to have sort of 30 years of experience of BCS membership to get involved in this kind of stuff. So thank you for demonstrating that. My first question was going to be asking around why did you get involved, but you've taken that one from me at the end of talking about that kind of that opportunity and passion. I guess there was a bit on kind of what's needed in council, and I guess a lot of the thought was around diversity of opinions really important to you. Are there any other kind of requirements as such to kind of are there any other kind of skills you'd look, or are there any skills that people will gain from joining council?
Oh, good question. So I think the only thing is you need to be a professional member, and just to answer a question that's popped in the chat as well, you need to have a professional member. So it must be M or FBCS is the kind of person who will nominate or propose in second. Skills. What do you learn? So I as chair, I'm learning diplomacy as a skill. I don't know, I should have put more thought into this one. What skills? So So I would say you don't need to be confident. For anyone who's not sure about confidence, right? It's not about being confident, but being willing to be brave enough to ask a question, or to interrogate whatever it is we're doing. But because there are opportunities when we review the BCS strategy. So we get an update from the CEO in every meeting. I should mention that. So it will be Rashik. It has been Rob of late, and in his acting position, we get an update from the CEO every time. And so there is an opportunity to ask questions in that kind of situation. So I would say that as a member of council, you have a responsibility that if you're concerned by something you see, to ask a question about it. And that's easier said than done, I think, when you're sitting, potentially when you're in a room, rather than just online. It can be sometimes a little bit intimidating is not the right word, but that situation you were worried about whether it's a stupid question or not. Well, I will always say no question is a stupid question. And just because you think somebody else might have already asked it in a previous council meeting before you remember, that does not mean it shouldn't be repeated. So I think that that's less of a skill, but more of a characteristic. Be happy to answer questions. I think, yes, I didn't know BCS inside out when I joined at the council as a member, and very quickly became vice chair. I'm a glutton for punishment, I think would be the way to describe me. And I didn't know BCS inside out. So it was an opportunity to ask, well, why are we doing it like this? So again, it's more of, again, of behavior, so that in being curious, inquisitive minds are definitely welcome. So yeah, maybe that sort of thing, shall I say, rather than skills. I do think you will. It's incredibly useful for the CV, because people will see that you've been able to bring problem solving and that sort of thing to the table, being able to articulate I was going to say an argument, but articulate a point and that kind of thing, which I'm doing terribly right now. But being able to communicate well, I think, even if that is listening, right? So communication is listening. It's not just getting your point across. So I think that is incredibly important and incredibly useful skill to either bring or develop. Use it as a place to develop both listening and your communication.
Great, thank you. And Jag in the chat suggested, I don't know if it was an output, developing your influence and skills. It's a great opportunity.
Very much. You're absolutely right there.
And there's an awful lot of that opportunity. I think, Sharon talked through the kind of particularly around strategy workshops and feeding back on organizational strategy. This is a kind of collective approach taken in the organization, and at council, obviously trustees are heavily involved in it, and council's another opportunity to be able to do that. So that's great. I think another point, you said you weren't communicating particularly well. I think you've done a fantastic job, and it's amazing to have you as chair of council come and talk to some of our early career advocates. And that's a really positive step for people to be able to understand, what council is and where the opportunities are to get involved. So don't be hard on yourself. And you've done a great job in this group and communicating with members. As everyone can probably tell, I'm a terrible waffler. Would anybody like to ask a question? You can put your hand up if you'd like, and remember, be brave and ask a question. Doesn't necessarily have to feel like don't worry if you feel like a stupid question. Questions are welcome. Put your hand up or just type in the chat. We've got one from Lasif. So the role description for early career advocate on the site indicates that ECA should not have any other mandatory roles in the committee. So anyone who applies for the council as an ECA should not hold what positions at the same time. So I think as part of, correct me if I'm wrong, Sharon, is it that when you apply for a position on council, you can only apply from one constituency? Is that right? So
yeah, so you can only apply from one constituency. I applied as an individual. There are some people that go forward as through they're nominated by their member group, and there's the early professionals, young professionals brand category as well. But yeah, so you can only apply as one of those, or be nominated through one of those three. I think there's 3 vehicles, maybe 4.
Yeah.
I think I would know. I can't remember. What I would say is, so there will be certain things like if you're already if you're a vice president of a board, or you're deputy president, or any of those things, then you shouldn't apply to be on council. But apart from that, I don't think there are any limitations within of being a council member. So we wouldn't say that you couldn't be a chair of one member group if you're a council member. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. And let's see if you've got any additional questions, feel free to ask them. But so yeah, that's right. So as a community member groups, there are 4 positions that we take into council, and that is the branches, specialist groups, international sections, and young professionals. So lots of opportunities there, as well as the individual. And I know lots of our community actually apply for individuals as well. So that's great. Are there any more questions in the chat or any hands raised? Let me just check. And have you spotted that additional question there, Sharon?
I have spotted that. So I would, do you know what? I genuinely don't know.
I can help you with this one, I think.
Go for it. I've got an answer for other ones, but that one I don't know.
Yeah, so the voting for the ECA representative on council, who would vote? So each member group has 1 vote that they're able to vote on nominations. That'll be voted by either the early career advocate, or it can be voted on by the chair if there isn't an early career advocate on that committee. So 1 group, 1 vote. That sounds like a manifesto, doesn't
it? Brilliant. Yeah. Yes, because I knew that's what it was for other positions that were from the member group, the specialist group. So there you go. I feel like I told you there's quite a number of regulations. I'm not on top of all of them. Do you need to have knowledge, experience, or background in apprenticeships and boot camps? No, you don't. Absolutely not. But if you've got them, you're really welcome. I've had discussions about this, because as council we have a survey, and one of them is about do we have the right skills to within council, and so I went back and I said, do we capture what skills we have? Do we capture any gaps? But also, can we change it? And we don't change it. We can't change the process. So essentially, what I always would hope for is that we end up with a really broad set of applications to be members of council, so that the likelihood of that diverse set of experiences then ends up in council as well. So that will be people that really understand how our apprenticeships or any apprenticeships work, and those who haven't a clue. It'll be people who've been academics for very many years. I was going to put a number on it, but let's just say multiples of 10s, and those who have just joined an SME as a graduate. What we really want is lots of different people who understand different things, and you'd be amazed at how quickly you pick up things as you go along as well.
Great, thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Jag, for helping out with the endless waffling of myself. Great, so I think that might be all the questions. If you do have any more, feel free to message myself, jjeffrey@bsis.co.uk, not co.uk, or groups@bsis.uk, and our coordinators of each group will be able to provide you a bit more information. We have a comms plan for promoting the opportunities of council that starts from the 25th of October, so you'll receive information on how to put yourself forward, how to get nominations, and the electoral process of council and BCS AGMs. So keep an eye on for that. If it isn't a role for yourself, or you think there's someone in your group who might be interested in the branch or specialist group or section, or even just applying as an individual, I think as Sharon said, we're really keen to get as many and a particularly diverse set of applications as possible. So please do share the good word of council. Hopefully we'll see a few people registered on this event come through in the nominations. Sharon, before we close, have you got anything you'd like to kind of close on? Any thoughts or?
No, everyone's welcome. Please put yourselves forward, and hopefully you can know how to find me. If you can't, find John, and then he'll find me for you.
Thank you, so much appreciated. Thank you so much, Sharon. Really appreciate you coming to talk to our early career advocates, and I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their Monday evening. Thank you. Good night. Cheers all. Bye.